Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I'd like to address you in regards to America's birthday. Today is the 4th of July, and on this day in 1776, our founding fathers helped America to declare its independence from tyranny and decided to start over anew with a new way of government, a new way for the people to be a nation of the people, by the people, for the people. And we declared our independence, and then we fought long and hard for it. And we came out of that with a constitution that became the law of the land, the ultimate, holder of the spirit of intent of what we were trying to do and trying to be as a nation. And we have come really far. But unfortunately, in present day, our historical context, our situational context, and our fine context of America in present tense is not doing so well. I don't think that it's any one person's fault, but I do believe that we have a growing movement by people in America that have taken upon themselves to seek to make America into something that works for only a few people at the disadvantage of many other people, leaving people behind by the side of the road and rigging a system of insular protections for these little isolated pockets of thriving. This is what I call the deviant echelon of society. It's a group of people that are trying to lead America in a very certain specific direction. And that direction is not one that works for 100% of the people here. And it is growing even more corrupt. It's perverting, what is common sense, good humanity, what is decency, what's, honorable, what's just, what's fair, what's reasonable, what's right. We have people in the current administration that are themselves breaking laws and then making up arbitrary laws to impose upon other people who are trying to dissent from this form of leadership that is taking us in a direction that not all of us want to go in. And I think there's still many people that are a part of that echelon that are in like the back tail end of it, that aren't getting the, full glory of, insulated protections as, many people at the tippy top of this deviant echelon who are starting to realize that they're getting the fallout of negative consequences, outcome consequences of negative decision making from the current administration. And it's sad and it's unfortunate. Innocence is suffering. Good people are getting harmed. Our nation is hurting. We're getting rift, pitted side against side. There's factioning. We have a government now that thinks that it has the authority to tell you what to do, what to think, what to feel, what to say, how to say it when you can say it. That's not freedom, that's not independence. And they're grandstanding, they're making this into this whole big circus sideshow act. This is why many of them are made up of performers who have come from, these news outlets that know exactly how to make you think and feel a certain way in order to cast a light of like, this is what's truth and reality, even when the lived experience of people is the actual truth contradicts what they say. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that we have a president, POTUS 47. He is making, I call him President Pandemonium. He's making everything just into this chaotic, nonsensical, elaborate bread and circus, scheme. He's rigging systems in favor of a few. He's letting off people, in creating an unjust system by, giving pardons to people who have given him bribes. He's breaking down our legal system. He's, putting the Supreme Court in his pocket. He's telling, legal firms, you have to bend to my will. He's telling universities, you have to bend to my will. He's made an attack on diversity, equity, inclusion, and he doesn't even know how to define it. It's his way to come in and say, you're doing a thing that I don't think is right, so I'm going to label it as diversity, equity, inclusion, and I said that that's a no-no because of some executive order that I signed off on, and so I'm going to strip away, your credentials. I'm going to strip you away of your funding. I'm going to strip you away from, your capacity to bring in students from, out of the country. Anything I can do to break you down, beat you down to size, and then build you back up in my image, because the only way I'm going to allow you to be in America, to do your thing, is if you do it my way. And, many institutions have proven themselves to be spineless, servile, and many becoming sycophants. And I understand, it's like, what are you supposed to do? You're put in a terrible situation, and the easiest thing to do is just to fall in line and just to submit yourself and succumb to the way things are. But it's, as MLK would say, it's like the day that you become silent about things that are unjust is the day that evil wins. Not exactly what he says, but more or less saying that it's your duty to stand up against things that are wrong, because that's what a democracy is about. And the current President Pandemonium, is trying to take away that right, or that sense that you have that right. But it's something that George Washington, first president of the United States, said, that, the law of the land is the Constitution, and its keepers are the people. And we elect a president, and that president takes an oath of office to solemnly swear to faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States, and to the best of their ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And what we've seen from POTUS 47 is a subversion of the Constitution, an outright denial and rejection of the Constitution, a reimagining and reinterpretation of it in such a way that's such a perversion, such an askew from the original spirit of intent, and in such a way that many people who are just trying to fight against this are saying, that's not how the Constitution actually reads. That is not what that means by that. Ultimately, we created this nation because we believed that power should not be concentrated in individuals, shouldn't be concentrated in an executive. We should have a separation of powers, so that in every separation has its own designated duties, responsibilities, and powers, so that that power doesn't concentrate and then become corrupt and tyrannical. Well, what you're seeing now is corruption, tyranny. You're seeing bad actors with nefarious intent come in and give the illusion of administration, the illusion of leadership, when in reality it's a, crafting of a dog-eat-dog, mighty crush the weak, free-for-all hellscape. And if you're not a part of this deviant echelon of society, the ones who are taking a path that says, we're doing it our way for our interests, our little insulated pockets of thriving for us, me, and if you're either with us or you're against us, and we hold all the power, and we're going to use that power against you because we have to suppress you in order to make sure that we're constantly surpassing you. We're the supreme power. We're the supreme beings. We're the supreme, end all be all. That's the type of environment that they're creating right now. The POTUS 47 regime, it's not even really an administration. What are they administering? They're making nonsensical laws and rules, and instead of taking, tact and strategy and being reasonable, just making sure that policies are fair, that work to serve the best interest of all parties involved. They're like, how can I rig this system in favor of me, my friends? Me in the, deviant echelon of society. And they don't care about anybody else. That's what we're in right now. And our founding fathers would be beside themselves with frustration and anger, righteous anger for sure, because this is not the way that it was intended to be. The proper intention of our nation was set in, declared in our Declaration of Independence, conformed and committed to with integrity in our Constitution. And we're losing that, and we're losing sight of that because, this current administration, President Pandemonium and his cohort are creating bread and circuses to distract everybody, keep everybody from focusing on the good work that needs to get done to get us through, for 249 years. How are we going to make to the next centennial, And what is it going to look like when we get there? Are we going to be more free, more liberated? Are we going to be a more perfect union? I don't see that happening with an administration that's coming in and saying, oh, you're a citizen, a naturalized citizen? Well, we're going to now say we can just take away your citizenship from you, and, by whatever justifications we're going to find, and we're going to put that over the head of you and anybody else that, if you don't abide by our rules and our laws, we're just going to take that away from you. And so, don't dissent, don't, congregate, don't gather, don't group, don't fight against the system. Be silent, be conformed, be complacent, and be a willing, submitted victim to the circumstances that we're going to create that are going to disadvantage you, harm you, and those you care about, because you no longer have freedom. You have the freedom to shut up, sit down, shut up, stand there, and look like you are content. Are you really content, though? I know I'm not. I'm not content with these outcomes. We have the POTUS 47 regime. Mr. President Pandemonium himself is doing an attack on diversity, equity, inclusion, can't even define what that means to him, or in any reasonable sense how it, conforms to his sense of, jurisprudence was just, fair, reasonable, and right. I do agree we shouldn't be making decisions of whether somebody should get an advantage or not based off of some sense of you may be put at a disadvantage or not. I think that we should have a system that just works for 100% of the people here. We don't have that. And why we started forming diversity, equity, and inclusion was because we realized the system was rigged out of the favor of many people, and we needed to make some sort of corrective mechanism in order to adjust things back into the accords with, a fair system that is based in equality and justice for all. But, now they've turned this current administration has turned it into a way for them to justify being racist, anti-Semitic, and to create this idea of, white supremacy and white nationalism. If you're not, a white male and not rich enough in their terms, you don't count in society to them. They don't care about you. Their systems are not working for you. Their laws and their policies and their rules are not for you. They're skewed out of your favor. So I really wish more people would wake up to the fact that, those systems that, were in place to help as a corrective mechanism for situations where the system was skewed out of favor for people, were there for your protection. It was there to say, no, man, we have to do something, because if we don't do something and don't have a system, a corrective mechanism in place, there could be people that can come in and by their personal decision-making and innate biases, make sure that certain people are not going to be benefited or recognized or given any advantages for. They're wiping the history books, eliminating women from the books and any African Americans from the books, or any persons of color. Your nation of origin isn't, specifically America, whatever. Like, they are eradicating you. They're disappearing you from history books and leaving it so people don't have role models that look like them, talk like them, act like them, think like them, have the same cultural, roots and culture that you have. And so they're conforming everybody to think, you have to be white in order to be American. And I just don't believe in that. I don't believe in that at all. I know that we are a diverse nation made of many peoples from many backgrounds, many classes, colors, and creeds. And there's no way that we could define ourselves as a free and independent nation if we were made up of one certain type of people. Our diversity is our proof that we're independent. We're independent from ideological, powers that could come in and say, if you don't conform to our specific standard, you aren't going to make it, And for me, diversity, equity, inclusion means diversity. America works for everyone, 100% of the people here. Equity is like it does that without the disadvantage of anyone. And inclusion, so nobody gets left behind. And why do we do this? Because America's supposed to be about everyone living the good life. That's the American dream. It's not the white picket fence and the house that you own and you have 2.3 children and a dog and all these other those are things, yes, that represent aspects of a good life, but that's not the only way that you can live the good life. The American dream is about living the good life, knowing that you're, living under the protective tenets of the Constitution. You have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and justice for all. That we, the people, are forming a more perfect union, we're establishing justice, we're ensuring domestic tranquility, we're providing for the common defense, we're promoting the general welfare, we're securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That's what America's about, and nobody gets left behind in that situation. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the original spirit of intent, and our evolution is supposed to be an ever more perfect union, meaning that we were never perfect before, so trying to take us back is, great again. You're not going to make us great again. We have to be striving, taking risks for higher things. There's so much more in store for us if we just open ourselves up to the possibilities and recognize, wow, I'm just so excited about the potential of what America can be. Let's not make America great. Let's help America actualize its best potential, and recognize that's a never-ending process. That's what will be our enduring legacy. We know that each one of us represents a continuation on the continuum of that actualization, the best version that we can achieve now, given all the situation, given our historical context, our situational context, and our fine context, meaning where we're at right now. It's each and every one of us is responsible as citizens, of the world, to participate and contribute and to bring about, as best we can, the best version of what life, liberty, pursuit of happiness can mean for us. So I want to read a little bit from my Citizens Rule book, just a few things that I think are important for Americans to hear on this day. The first being a quote from the Bible. It says, "Woe to those who decree unjust statutes, and to those who continually record unjust decisions, to deprive the needy of justice, and to rob the poor of my people of their rights." Isaiah 10:1 and 2. And the proclamation of liberty inscribed on our hallowed Liberty Bell are those words, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And when I think about it, it's like all the inhabitants thereof. It doesn't say that citizens means that you have to be, you know, a person born here or naturalized. Citizenship means that you belong. You belong in America. You belong to America. You know, the United States of America is a welcoming place of belonging for all those who believe in the tenets, the founding principles, who believe in the original spirit of intent of our nation. The other factor is the fact that we are a nation built on laws. Laws are what give us our legitimacy, and we have a President Pandemonium who can't even really give us a clear and coherent understanding of his own personal sense of jurisprudence. The way that he approaches law is that he thinks if you have enough money, you can get enough lawyers and you can get out of anything. And if you have enough money to be able to, pay somebody in a back room, handshakes his dollars situation, you can get pardoned for any of the wrongdoings you've done before. No matter that, the victims of, your crimes will never know justice because it's been denied because of a pardon that you've given to somebody, that's the current administration's mentality. And to me, it's like pardons are there, they're a mechanism in order to say, we believe in redemption. We believe in the redeeming qualities of, justice is supposed to have that as an endpoint, that as an outcome. It's not about, punishment. It's about discipline. It's like we're disciplining our people to understand there's a need for domestic order to be sustained and maintained, and that we all as citizens are obliged to uphold the law. And when we are infringing or we're stepping outside of that, we need to come back into accordance. We need to be brought back into, in a reasonable way, integrated back into society in such a way that makes sure that you're not a repeat offender. And for you to redeem yourself so you don't constantly think of yourself as, this wrongdoer that, that's who you are. Like, making a mistake is only a problem if you choose not to fix it. But we have to also understand that justice is also about making people whole. It's about making the victims whole, as well as making sure that the perpetrators are made whole too, that they're brought back into a sense of what domestic order is all about and what their part in their, participation, contribution, rights, and responsibilities are to uphold that, which is part of the idea of what a citizen's job is. But we need to do that for victims as well. And I think that when you have, President Pandemonium giving away pardons to people who are never made to learn the lesson from the mistakes that they made, they turn into repeat offenders. Maybe not so directly or obviously, but in their mind, they got away with something that reasonable people would have said was wrong. And reasonable people did say it was wrong because they were found in a court to have done wrong. And with no course of, reconfirming them to come back into the meridian of doing what's right, invited back into, citizenship in community with the rest of us, they were just, written off and they never should have gotten in trouble for that. This is what happened with the January 6 people in particular that frustrates me, because I do believe there should have been pardons, presented to people who were ready, able, and willing to accept their mistake and to fix it. There was no fixing involved in any of that, and many of these people went on to become repeat offenders in other ways, and many of them now feel emboldened by that pardon to take actions into their own hands, and we are starting to become a lawless society because of it, which is unfortunate because that's a really hard that's a step that's really hard to walk back. Once you open that can of worms, it's like Pandora's box. How are you gonna put it all back in there? It's gonna be really hard to do unless you create another box outside of it, right? Of conforming ourselves to a new set of rules and ideas and laws that help to guide us and keep us in accordance with one another. And I think that that's really our only option moving forward. We can't turn back time. But what we can do is to set ourselves up for a redemption of time, so that in the karmatic retribution of time, the outcome consequences are going to be what helps to bring us together rather than to tear us apart. So another thing that I like to read in this book is the concept of the law of the land. We understand that our nation is presented by John Adams, who was our second president of the United States. He made this quote that our rights, they come from God, not from the state. You have rights antecedent to all earthly governments, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, rights derived from the great legislator of the universe. And I think that's really where we have to focus our new parameters for our government. And once we establish that as, we are one nation under a God indivisible, to me, that is, nothing can separate us. And once we understand that that's the overriding, nature and nature's laws is what we have to abide by, then we can start to dismantle some of the laws that have been created over time that have actually infringed our liberty and that actually are limiting us from making progress, and that help us to be able to create a justice system built off of, discipline and redemption, so that we are not, as we currently stand, are the largest incarceration rate of any nation. And we're building concentration camps. This administration is building concentration camps to put people who they think are, unsavory characters, based off of nothing more than the fact that they entered in to America by means that were not legitimized, and that their continued, involvement of working jobs and participating, contributing to society isn't legitimate enough. Even though you do pay taxes and these sorts of things, it's not legitimate enough, because the system wasn't created to make that legitimacy. And instead of investing in making it legitimate, you invest in deporting and throwing people in concentration camps. To me, that just proves that we have a really big problem. Our criminal justice system is not focused on justice, and because of that, we have a really high incarceration rate. And that's not based off of redemption at all. It doesn't amount to forgiveness, and if anything, it actually makes matters worse, because you're creating laws that make these people into criminals when they haven't actually done anything that's harmful to society. And then turning them into criminals, what more do you expect for, you make them into criminals, and then you imprison them because they're criminals, but their only true crime is the fact that they didn't adhere to your sense of, how you can exist and be and present yourself in this nation. We have immigrants that are here that all they needed was just a sense of credentials, give us a legitimate pathway, build a golden door of opportunity. We'll enter in through it. We'll participate, we'll contribute, we will help to make America great, grand, wonderful, whatever you want. We want to be a part of it because we believe in what the Constitution stands for. We believe in the Declaration of Independence, and we want that for ourselves and others. We don't want to make America bad. We want to improve upon it along with you. Just give us a legitimate seat at the table, and we're all about it. You know, so many immigrants have improved the quality of America, and they are now being deemed illegal and turned into criminals, treated subhuman, and sent to concentration camps. Your hard-earned dollars and tax dollars are going investing into that instead of funding Meals on Wheels, cancer research, you know, food stamps for people, you know. And to me, it just doesn't make sense that that's the way it is, but that's the way that, you know, President Pandemonium thinks is greatness for America. There's nothing great about that. This nation is one nation under a God indivisible. As Abraham Lincoln put it, shall have a new birth of freedom. And when we, you know, fought the Civil War and we were able to liberate our brothers and sisters from the unconscionable, inhumane, unreasonable situation of slavery, and we allowed all, you know, African Americans to, in time, become a part of this nation in wholeness, we have benefited greatly from that. And the same thing can happen for immigrants. We just need to have a declaration of, you know, the same thing that we did. We abolished slavery. Let's abolish this sense of legal, illegal in immigration. Let's reimagine and rethink what immigration can be and make sure that it's a part of the prestige and the pride of our nation. It really should be that way. Besides, there's a whole lot of, you know, naturalized citizens that I know that have a better understanding of America and its histories, its laws, its principles, its rules than even the current sitting president has. You know, when you have to take your citizenship test, you learn a lot about the nation, and you definitely know a whole lot more than what the current sitting president knows and understands. Another thing from the book that I want to read, where it says, where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty. And it's kind of interesting because I think we have a little bit of both right now. We have a tyrannical president, Pettis 47, and his regime, his MAGA cohort. You know, they're based off of tyranny. They're removing your rights. And they're legitimizing laws that are not adhering to the Constitution, which is the ultimate law of the land. And, you know, skewing facts and rigging systems into their favor. And that's tyranny. And then you have, at the same time, liberty. The government is so afraid of you right now that you'll realize that you have the liberty to stand up against that, to make new decisions, you know, to decide. All the people that are in government right now that are just falling in line with this administration, letting them just do whatever they want, you know, none of those people need to be voted back in. You can vote for new people, you know, new people that are going to do things differently, do things right for us. And you have the liberty to go out. Many people are going out today and protesting for the Free America protests. And you have the liberty to do that. You also have the liberty to choose where you're going to spend your money. You also have the liberty to choose whether or not you're going to work or not. I think that that's one of the things that we really need to make very clear to the current president of the United States, that if everybody just decided we're going to pull a COVID-like, you know, situation on them to stop working, stop consuming, stop producing, stop involving ourselves in America, how long would it be before he'd be brought to his knees and beg for us to please, you know, involve yourself again with America? You know, we were not in such a great place when COVID happened. And though it was the government that said, shut everything down, you're not going to be able to work, you know, you can't see your loved ones, you can't make a life, can't make a living, because we're so afraid of this invisible threat that may come in and cause us harm. The government ended up doing a lot of damage in doing the wrong thing in response to that. But when you think about what ended up happening with all the people that didn't work, America suffered immensely, but it was more on the lines of the government realizing how the only power that they had was to tell people, what to do, what to think, what to feel. If the people realize they have ultimate power to do that, you have your own independence, you are self-governed, choose for yourself what's the right thing to do, the right time, the right way, for the right reasons, and self-govern, and choose that you're not going to participate and contribute into their society, their way of life. You can opt out of that. And I'm not suggesting that that's what we need to do, but what I am saying is that we need to have a revolution of sorts, a common, beautiful revolution, one that sets us on a trajectory that takes back the power. Got to take back our power from those who are taking it away from us right now. And we need to focus that power in a direction that actually serves our common best interests, that makes common sense. When you think about it, it's like, why do you do a thing? Well, you do it because it's just and it's fair and it's reasonable and it's right. And your conscience tells you, this is the best interest for all parties involved. This is going to help to build, friendships. It's going to help to be the right thing for all parties involved. This is going to be something that I can stand by with integrity. It's the truth. And if we have that in our hands to decide for ourselves, and we recognize the current administration is not upholding any of that, they're not adhering to what I was describing, which is the 4-way test by the Rotarians, which suggests, anything that you do in business or in personal life or even in politics, it should adhere to the 4-way test. Is it the truth? That's the biggest one. Is it the truth? And that one just disqualifies President Pandemonium right off the bat because he can't tell the truth. He can't adhere to the truth, and that's why his story changes all of the time. And his followers and his administration, their story changes all the time because it's not the truth. It's based off of what do we need to tell the American people in order to get them off our backs and make them think everything's fine. Don't raise a fuss. Don't look over here, we're going to distract you with something over here. And there's a lot of that going on, and there's no discipline. They aren't disciplined as people, they have no actual set of core soul print values that they adhere to. If you dangle $1 in front of them, they can very easily be bribed to shift their, their allegiance, their opinions, their beliefs. You threaten them in some capacity, they will very easily bend and break and align, and that's how President Pandemonium is getting everybody to fall in line with him. It's, leading by fear and force instead of, this fierce independence, which is what America has always been about. That's what we were founded on, fierce independence. I think that the motto of America, what America truly stands for, is the concept, go forth and freedom go with you. And I really think that that's what we should be thinking about on the 4th of July, America's birthday. We declared for ourselves, we're going to go forth, freedom's going to go with us, and we're going to do the things that we believe are just, fair, reasonable, right? We're going to adhere ourselves to the highest law of the land, our Constitution, and we're going to make laws that we need, that are necessary in order to help us to stay in alignment and attunement with that, but doesn't hinder us so that we aren't so conformed and limited so that we can't make progress. Because guess what? Remember, we're making an ever more perfect union, and that's what this is supposed to be about. So another thing that I want to read from this book is, gotta find it here. I love this because it tells you, it reads out the Constitution, it tells you all the amendments. And if you have never read the Constitution, I highly suggest it. Again, this is the preamble. I'll reread it. The Constitution of the United States. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And I think with the fact that we're not getting the separation of powers, which is built into the Constitution, is one of the biggest reasons why, and proof that the current sitting president cannot uphold his oath of office. He is effectively neutering the powers of Congress and holding them at ransom, threatening them that he's gonna, primary them, replace them with somebody else, calling Supreme Court justices on speed dial, letting them know, vote in my favor. They already did him the great favor of saying that he is effectively immune from law. Like, law doesn't apply to him, as long as it's in the realm of his administrative duties, and anything he does, he can say, oh, that's my job. It's my job to be this way. It's my job to do this. It's my job to rip away, all of your social supports and social securities, promote your general welfare. It's my job to take that away. It's my job to, send people without, due diligence of giving them their due process. I'm just going to send them away. It's my job to just send people away to foreign gulags. It's my job to disappear people off the streets. It's my job to separate families. It's my job to pardon people and give no justice to their victims. It's my job to make sure everybody rewrites history and rethinks it that January 6th was a day of love instead of violence. It's my job to make sure that Black history is removed from, America's books and historical sites. It's my job to make sure women aren't referenced either, Like, that's his job, in his opinion. That's what he's supposed to be doing. Mind you, it hasn't been lowering the cost of food, bringing down the cost of energy, bringing down the cost of fuels. It hasn't been making sure that we have a stable supply of necessary resources, life vital essentials for Americans. It's not about making sure that we have an education system and that every student gets properly educated for the preparation for the future, the needs of the future. It's not about making sure that our elderly have, security in their old age. It's not about making sure that youth have a future or that they're nurtured or taken care of. It's not about making sure that, you have food to eat. It's not about making sure, no, his job is not about you and making your life better. It's about criminalizing people, threatening people, bullying people, buddying up with authoritarians, joking about, bringing peace to the world and solving, wars in 24 hours when that was not even within his capacity or his capability, And why? First of all, I just have to say this because my heart is with Ukraine at all times. What is so funny about building up the hopes of these people who have been suffering and enduring the unconscionable evils of war? Why set their hopes up only for you to pull that carpet out from underneath them and say, oh, I was saying I was going to be able to solve that I was going to bring peace to that war, I was going to stop it. It was a joke. It's funny. It's funny to make people think that you're bringing them hope, that there may be a potential, peaceful resolution to this conflict that they've having to endure. It's funny to you to bring their hopes up and then rip it away from them, huh? That's the quality of man that is in the office of president right now, And pray be every day, my heart is with the people of Ukraine, and I am so completely proud of them for their endurance and their strength and their integrity and their commitment to protect and to uphold their sovereignty. What they're fighting for every single day is exactly what America was doing on this day 249 years ago. We were saying no more. We're not going to let some bully come in and try to tell us what to do, what to think, what to feel, trying to remove from us our way of life, trying to dictate for us that, you know, we have to be a part of their imperialistic ideologies and you have to submit to our laws and our rules, which are never in your favor. We said no to that tyranny, and that's exactly what Ukraine is doing right now. And they're doing the right thing. Theirs is a just and noble cause. And I wish that they didn't have to fight. And I know that none of them would if they didn't have to. They would today lay down their arms gratefully if it meant that they can live in peace and in wholeness without the fear of somebody coming in and taking away their rights from them again, using violence against them. They would gladly let it all go, because to them that's all that matters. That's all that they want. They want peace, and the same cannot be said for the other side. And that's the unfortunate thing that I don't think that POTUS 47 realized when he made the joke, so funny, ha ha ha, let me make you think that I'm going to bring peace, when in reality he had no idea. He had no idea. He thought that he was going to use his clout and his buddy-buddy friendship with Putin to be able to set things right. That was never going to work. You do have to work with Putin in order to bring a resolution to this unfortunate situation. But that's not going to happen if you're not willing to take a stand for what is just, fair, reasonable, right. And Trump is just a jokester. You know, he thinks it's funny to make people think he's going to do a thing, and then he later says, oh yeah, the thing that I said I was going to do, I didn't really mean it. He's done that to Ukraine. He's done that to the American people. Excuse me. And so I think it's kind of hard. Like, how do you trust a person who can't adhere to truth and who trolls people and bullies people? You know, one of the recent things that I heard was he used an anti-Semitic term, a long-enduring anti-Semitic term, to make a reference to something, and he claimed that he was ignorant of the usage being inappropriate and that the word to him meant something that didn't register as being a negative thing in his understanding of the word and his intent behind the use of it. And it's reasonable if that was the case, because maybe, you know, he's not a very eloquent person. He's not a very well-versed person, so it's reasonable to think that he picked up this word somewhere in the groups of people that he's hung around, and maybe they didn't give him the full context of its meaning, but allowed him to think that this word stands for a certain thing. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll use that word in reference to this. And so he just blurted it out. I think he does that with a lot of stuff. I mean, gosh, he mimics and mocks anything that he hears on Fox News, you know. So it's reasonable to think he just picked this word up over time. But the point is, if you didn't know that this was a bad thing, and then you say it and people are calling you out saying, that's actually a really bad thing to say, the conscious person, the person with a conscience and the person who's conscious of his actions would have said, oh wow, my bad. And I didn't mean to offend you, you know, and in no way was that word meant to suggest that I'm being anti-Semitic. And, you know, I heard this term referenced in this way, and understanding now that you've informed me that this is something that's anti-Semitic, you know, I apologize for any offense that it might have caused, and left it at that. But he couldn't even apologize for it. You know, and that's the thing, is like, they make mistakes and they aren't willing to fix it. That's the biggest problem that I have with them, is the fact that they make mistakes, and then they just hide it all. It's like a dog that pees on your carpet and then will, shred a bunch of paper to cover over it to make it seem like you're not going to be able to notice that they peed on the carpet because you're too busy being mad that they shredded the paper up everywhere in front of it. It's like the worst problem is underneath the distraction that has been created, And I think the other problem is that he really doesn't have shame. He doesn't have shame. He doesn't have a sense of humility. And I'm not saying he's a totally 100% completely bad person. I believe all people are redeemable. I just don't think that he cares. He doesn't care. He doesn't care to improve, and nobody is surrounding him that is giving him, critical, constructive feedback. They are just all sycophants and yes men. And whenever he says something or does something that's wrong, they just give him excuses to get out of having to take ownership for anything that he does. And I think that he grew up with that type of silver spoon in his mouth, and so that's why he doesn't know how to do it. Everybody else fixed problems for him. And if you have enough money to throw at the problem and enough people around you that are willing to, gain from the benefits of the power of being around you, or they're willing to do whatever to be your, problem fixers and, clean up the messes that you make, he doesn't know how to be accountable for anything that he does. And then he will just, take it from whoever tells him what to do, what to think, what to feel, because there's somebody pulling his strings, behind the scenes, which I think is a lot of, his rich friends were just like, hey, why don't you try doing this thing or whatever? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll try doing that. And they have a good laugh about it later, like how we actually got away with it sort of thing. And it's just like, that's not what America's supposed to be about. Our president should not be so corruptible. And the fact that him and his family are profiting, and have, even from the last administration, profiting from the presidency, I think is a very unfortunate thing. It's certainly not what America should be standing for. There should be integrity. I do believe, actually, and I will say this because this is leading into what my vision for the future of America is. Again, we can't go back and change. All this mess has been made. It's time to untangle it. And I think that a really great way to envision the future of government moving forward is for the individual who is seeking presidency to have a entire business plan, essentially. Not that I don't think America is a business, but as an entire plan, constructed, and like, this is what we're going to do, this is the projects we're going to take on, this is how we're going to do it, these are going to be the timelines, all of this stuff, like an entire vision, business plan for America. And for that to be what they present to the people, and for people to vote based off of that. Not some charismatic, hollow promises and, hollow platitudes and, speaking out of both sides of your mouth and some sort of like chanting, rah, 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 get behind me, we're going to do this thing. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? What's your deadlines? How are we going to hold you accountable? What are going to be the corrective mechanisms built into the systems that you are generating so that if, did a thing and it didn't turn out how we had hoped it would, how can we correct the mechanism and set us back on a trajectory where we need to go? How can the people be involved in that? And so it's not just, a small group of people, in the higher ups of the, deviant echelon rigging systems in their favor. How can all of the people be involved? What is your job? Your job as the citizen of America. What are you expected to do? How can you participate and contribute? I think that's what we should have as the future of, campaigning, and the future of politics, and the future of government. It should be, if you want to become president of the United States, you need to have an entire business plan to the T of what you're going to do, and present that to the people, and the people say, all right, I can get behind that. That's what I want to be involved in. And instead of throwing money so that you can make an advertisement to say, vote for me and don't vote for that person because they're bad, invest money in the precursors to that project being enacted once that person becomes president. Invest in the early stages of it, kind of like, the seed investment in the capital of what we're going to build out together as a nation. Instead of money going to like newspapers and, news stations and whatever during political season. Let that money go to the projects that people are going to actually be building out. Pay for the people who are initiating those projects and showing you, like, this is a prototype that I'm going to set up in. We're going to stage this in all these different areas of America, obviously in the places where they're, the important cities where, their vote counts for more in the electoral college, which I don't necessarily agree with that whole system, but we can approach that at another time. But go to these places and show, this is what I'm about. This is my prototype. This is what we're going to enact on a larger scale once I'm in office. Let the presidency be about that. Let's innovate in terms of government, because the old system obviously is not working. If it was working, we wouldn't have a mindless radical in the White House right now. And so to me, having that type of vision for the future is really what we need to be looking at and looking forward to and looking towards. And that brings me to another section in my book that I want to read. It's talking about the law of the land. The general misconception is that any statute passed by legislators bearing the appearance of law constitutes the law of the land. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. In any statute, in order to be valid, it must be in agreement. It is impossible for a law which violates the Constitution to be valid. This is succinctly stated as follows. All laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. Mayberry versus Madison. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. Miranda versus Arizona. An unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights, it imposes no duties, affords no protection, it creates no office. It is in legal contemplation, as inoperative as though it had never been passed. Norton versus Shelby County. The general rule is that an unconstitutional statute, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since unconstitutionality dates from the time of its enactment and not merely from the date of the decision so branding it. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no courts are bound to enforce it. For me, I think that, summarizes the Constitution being one of the most important things that we need to consider on the 4th of July. Because, yeah, sure, today, 249 years ago, we declared our independence. We decided to establish our nation. We formed it. We're saying it's going to be a more perfect union, and we've ran with it, and we filled in with all of the necessary components over time. We wrote a constitution, said, hey, maybe that's not enough, and we threw in some amendments along the way, and that's changed and altered the course of our history, reimagined and revisioned what America's going to be about, where we're going, what we're going to achieve in the long term, in the long run, and ultimately has led us to where we are now. And unfortunately, the current POTUS 47, President Pandemonium, is trying to subvert the Constitution, trying to interpret it in such a way that actually takes away rights that we hard fought for and won. And it is necessary for us, the people, to understand, we are the keepers of the Constitution. We have to take back the power. We have to determine that the ultimate power rests with the people. Thomas Jefferson, one of the presidents of the United States, who was also the author of the Declaration of Independence, said himself that the corrective of the abuses of the Constitution is to teach people that that's the appropriate corrective. So we need to teach the people how to be, the keepers of the Constitution. I think it's a great place to start is to keep a constitution with you, to read it. Take this day to read it. Don't just, sit around the, campfire and, cook up some food on the grill and splash in the pool and hang out at the lake and, party with your friends and light off some fireworks. Those are all great. That's fun. And fun is a good thing. But we also have to be willing to fight for our rights to party, right? We wouldn't have the right to do all those fun things today if not for the fact that we fight for having those rights. And right now, many of those rights are being taken away from us right before our eyes, some of them in covert ways. And it's our job, it's our duty, it's our responsibility as citizens to take back that power. Read the Constitution, read the Declaration of Independence, because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things that we complained about in the Declaration of Independence that are being on rerun right now with the current sitting president of the United States, And so we need to be as brave and courageous and strong and determined and set in our ways as the founding fathers were, in the original spirit of intent of the founding of our nation. We need to bring back that sensibility, and we need to live by it. We need to adhere to it. This is where I'd like to take just a brief moment to talk about something that I will be discussing in further detail and hopefully be able to encourage more people to become involved with. My intention is to help us to reimagine the Constitution with another amendment. This would be 28th Amendment of the Constitution. It would establish a fourth branch of government, which would be called civics. The civics branch of government is bringing the power, taking back the power of the people, giving the people agency, giving people resource, and giving people capital, and giving people skin in the game, a seat at the table, a voice to speak with, and the ability to determine what laws are going to be created, and to make sure that we are able to have all relevant stakeholders considered in our contemplation of what type of laws we're going to create. Instead of typing up a bunch of words and shoving it all together and throwing it through the system in a meat grinder system as fast as possible through Congress like this big beautiful bill was done. Most of those people didn't even read it and went ahead and passed it anyway. They don't fully understand what they were signing into. It's literally like jumping out of an airplane with a backpack on your back, hoping there's a parachute in there, and then only coming to find out that there's no parachute. It doesn't make sense. Like, you need to understand what you're getting into when you're creating a law, and if this is the job and the duty of Congress, and they have not been upholding their duties. So I think a lot of them need to go, and we need to replace them with people who are willing to do the necessary work of enacting laws that we need and make sure that they're understandable. Laws should be short, simple, sweet, to the point. Should be easy to understand. They should have a sunset clause written into them and a renewal clause if necessary. So it's like, if by this time we figure it's not working for us, we need to do away with it. But there also has to be a way to, if we find before that time it's not working for us, corrective mechanism so we can set things right, so we're not, forced to live in the negative outcome consequences of something that we realize was a very bad idea, which I believe that's what this big beautiful bill is. It's a terrible idea with a lot of negative outcome consequences that are about to come back and intentionally hurt and harm everyday Americans. And it's unnecessary, it's unwarranted, it's unwanted, and the fact that most of the people who signed it into law don't even know what it says, and that we're just over time slowly going to be learning the finer details of how that's going to play out in our lives. And guess who's going to have to bear the blunt of the blow? Everyday Americans. Those people who are insulated in their little pockets of thriving in Congress and in the White House administration, those people are not going to be dealing with the consequences of this. They have no consequences. The only consequence that can be dealt to them right now at this moment in time is for the people themselves to vote them out. And that's why I believe we need to have a fourth branch of government, because in that we could have, instead of just waiting for an election to come by, that the people themselves have the capacity to be able to impeach members of Congress and even the President of the United States or Vice President of the United States if necessary. And that it would take a high bar standard by which that can be accomplished. And it would have to be based off of, truths and verifiable truths. And there would have to be evidence, and there would have to be a case, and it would have to be heard. But I believe that the people themselves should be the ones who get to determine whether or not we're going to continue on in this way. We have to have a corrective mechanism, and the power for that corrective mechanism needs to be placed in the hands of the people. Congress has their powers of corrective mechanism. The executive branch has their powers of corrective mechanism. And the judicial has their powers of corrective mechanism. The people now need to have power, and one of those powers needs to be a corrective mechanism so that we can set things right. I think that any law that goes into Congress first needs to be approved by the people. The people themselves are the ones who write it. The people themselves are the ones who determine what the language is going to be. It has to be smart, it has to be simple, it has to be succinct, it has to be easily understood. Again, it has to have, a sunset clause, it has to have corrective clauses, and it has to be able to be renewable if it does work. And it should go through the people first, and the people decide, the people vote, the people determine, and then they send it to Congress, who then has to actually read it. And yes, this is going to be a slower than rushing everything through before the holiday weekend process. But don't you think that patience and time is what it takes to do it right? Because it is. I've never seen a system where you've just done things on a whim really fast or whatever to work out in the best interest of all parties involved. It doesn't happen that way. There's always some sort of consequence, and it's usually the weakest and most vulnerable people who end up having to bear the brunt of the blow. That's exactly what's happening in this, the bill that has been presented that is now going to take away your rights and to force us to take on more responsibilities, which is where I think that, the guiding influence, like everybody now realizes we have to be involved. We have to take control of this into our own hands. The Constitution, we are the protectors. We are the holders of that ultimate power. The Constitution was an insular protection for the people from the government infringing on their lives. We need to take back a hold of that. Establish a new amendment to the Constitution, creating a fourth branch of government, giving power back to the people, making sure that the people have the capacity to create corrective mechanisms when the government is not doing their job to set things right. Give them more than just the power of voting when it comes to election time. Give the people themselves the power to determine this is the business plan of that particular candidate that I want to take on, and I'm going to start doing the work now of bringing that about. So even if, my chosen candidate doesn't win, at least we have the precursor sentiments set forth and built out, and we can see how that's going to benefit our lives, and maybe we can carry it on, as an auxiliary support system that can still do good work for America, even if that person doesn't become president, is able to enact that at scale. It can still help the people in these ways where we have been able to initiate it before it's taken on its role, as trying to be the platform, the true platform of a candidate. And the people themselves need to be able to have distinguished within this constitutional personal dominion, self-sovereign, autonomous personhood recognized for individuals. The people are self-governing, self-determined. And the government is there to help to make sure that everybody has the necessary stewardship, support, provision, accommodation that is necessary in order and the moderating influence is necessary for them to all get along, to become self-reliant, self-sufficient, self-sustaining, free, and independent people, because that's what this nation is supposed to be made about. And understanding that it's going to take communion with one another in order for that to work. So we need to foster the creative aspects of our communities and to empower them. You know, the ultimate power rests with the individual, always has, and always will, and always should with the United States. And then the communities are made up of individuals that are like-minded individuals that work together to make sure that we have the necessary supports so that we can remain self-sufficient, self-sustaining, free and independent people. And then moving up from there is where then we get into the local governance. And then we get into our state governance, and then we get into the federal governance. The federal should have very little to do with the individual's life. They shouldn't have the capacity to determine what happens at the individual level. The individual person, however, should be able to have a whole lot more say than they have now on what the executive branch does in terms of, we need the right moderating influence, and you have the capacity to umbrella that effect across the board for everybody to get everybody involved, you know, get everybody on board, get everybody, you know, in acceptance of it, and to help to convince those who are maybe holding out or having a little bit hard time of letting go of the status quo and embracing this change that's necessary for us in order to form a more perfect union. You have to be there to help make the hard decisions, help get people to be involved when it's necessary, because the people themselves determined, this is what we want, this is what we need, this is how we want to get it done, and this is what we're going to be about. Become involved, you know, that sort of thing. So with that, I'm going to let you go, because it is, after all, the 4th of July, and you should be out there having fun, having a good time, and celebrating your freedom and independence. And I just want you to think in the back of your head during this time frame, like, would it be possible to make a more perfect union if we establish a 4th branch of government and gave the power back to the people, take it back, and to turn the Constitution into that insulary protection for the individual, to invest power, more power concentrated into the community rather than into the executive branch, to put, you know, the right checks and balances on government as it is now so we can weed out the corruption, and to give the people, you know, power and agency and resource and the necessary capacities to determine for themselves what they're going to do, and to have that liberty, which ultimately, liberty is, if we can say anything about liberty, it's economy. It's your capacity to capitalize and to provision and to accommodate and to steward yourself and others, to build out that prosperity that we have promised to ourselves and our posterity, you know, and to live by the tenets of the Constitution, you know, everything that's stated in the preamble, that's what we should be about. We need to know that every political candidate and every political party, all of their policies and everything has to be about actualizing the tenets in the preamble to the Constitution, and then adhering to the overarching principle of liberty and life, liberty and justice for all as we pursue our happiness and achieve the good life, you know. And again, there's nothing stopping us from making sure that America works for 100% of the people here, you know, without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind, so everybody does live the good life. And all of our politicians should be about that, and it should definitely be about listening to the people, listening to the voice of the people, and helping to capture it and to bring it in. So it's like, you know, your voice may seem small, but when you put us all together, it's a mighty roar. And that's what we should be about. And if the government right now, as you see it, isn't necessarily, you know, helping to speak with your voice, it's rather trying to speak your mind for you, then obviously there's something wrong here with the concept. You're not very free, are you? You're not very independent, are you? You know, and you're not living a life of liberty. You are living in conformity, in isolationism. And, if we have to live in the outcome consequences of the decision making of our leadership, it should be leaders that actually care to take ownership of their actions and their policies to make sure that those outcomes are actually going to be good, to the benefit of everybody and not just to the advantage of a few. And we don't have that right now. President Pandemonium is doing some real work to test every limit of our freedom and to try to get away with as much damage done as he can. And he's gotten away with a lot of it. And there's about to be a lot of people who are hurt. And there's now a huge gap that has been created on top of an already existing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And now it's our responsibility as the people to step in and to bridge that gap between the haves and the have-nots. I'm not trying to, by any means, bring, the highest pinnacles of society down to size. I just want to raise the level standard of living for everyone. That's why I call, the deviant echelon of society, or the people who are selfish, all in it for themselves. This is where President Pandemonium exists, him and his cohort. They're all about themselves and each other. And then there's the criterion echelon of society. That's where we, the people, exist. That's where we need to establish as the standard of living for America that makes sure America is diverse, works for everybody, is equitable, so it's not to the disadvantage of anybody, inclusive, so nobody gets left behind, and that everybody lives the good life, which embodies the go forth, freedom go with you, preamble to the Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form that more perfect union. The tenets, the principles, the founding principles, the original spirit of intent of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, all those things need to be embodied in the people themselves. And we need to be given the power to have a branch in government to make designations of how we're going to be led, how we're going to be governed, how our country is going to evolve and change and grow over time, how we're going to unite with one another. And again, it's not about breaking down and tearing down the systems that people have created, in excess. It's about creating the right moderating influence that helps to make sure that we have a high standard of living, of the good life, where everybody belongs. That's the criterion echelon of society. That's what the 28th Amendment, establishment of the civics branch of government, would be able to achieve. And again, like I said, I think that having the future of our elections be about the best candidate with the best plan, that's set forth for people, that's tangible and real, and for people to be able to hold elected officials to account for that. Once you're elected, like, you said you were going to do this thing, and this is how you were going to do it, now get it done. And if you don't, we do have corrective mechanisms to be able to set things right, because we the people are not going to just sit idly by and watch you tear everything down that we've built up together over time, because this nation is not one nation under the rule of an almighty authoritarian. We are one nation under a God indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's what we're about. That's what we should continue to be about. And I hope that you will imagine the possibilities, remain open to those possibilities, see the potential in that, and move forward from this day. You want free America? Well, what does freedom look like to you? Everything that I presented here today, that's what freedom looks like to me. If you want to know more about my perspective, my perception, and my proposition to the nation as what I see we can do moving forward. Please check out my other videos. Trying to create as much content as I can to help to give a understanding of who I am as an individual, kind of help you to get to know me better so that you can see where I'm coming from, so you can better understand where I'm hoping that we are all going together. With that, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Happy birthday, America. Be well.